Scott Tim had been doing renovation work in Ottumwa, Iowa, for 19 years, and he had pulled apart enough old houses to know that the things people lose in them are usually unremarkable. Coins, a single earring, a child's crayon worn down to a nub, objects that fell into gaps and stayed there because the gap was easier to leave alone than to reach into. What he found under the stairs of the house on East Main Street in February 2024 was a matchbook. Small, red, the cover read Anchor Lounge in gold letters that had faded to the color of old straw. The interior was empty, no matches remaining, the striking strip worn smooth. He turned it over in his hand. It was the kind of matchbook that bars distributed from a dish on the counter in the era before smoking restrictions. The kind that cost nothing and went everywhere. He had found dozens of them in old houses. He had thrown all of them away. He did not throw this one away. He couldn't have said exactly why. Something about the house, the particular quality of stillness in it, the way the neighbors had fallen quiet when the renovation crew arrived, the way the woman at the Historical Society had looked at him when he mentioned what address he was working on. He put the matchbook in a small evidence bag he kept in his truck for things he wasn't sure about. He called the Wapello County Sheriff's Office. The deputy who took his call pulled the address. Then, she called the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation. The matchbook was 47 years old, give or take. It had been under the stairs of the Kerrigan house since sometime before the Anchor Lounge closed in 1983. That much was immediately knowable. What it had taken 47 years to know was whose it was, and why it mattered that it had been in that house at all, and what its presence under those stairs said about the Saturday afternoon in July 1977, when 3 children walked out the back door and were never seen again. But to understand what that matchbook meant, you have to go back to Ottumwa, and to July, and to the Kerrigan children. You have to understand who they were before the afternoon took them. Because the afternoon is not the whole story. The morning is part of it too. Ottumwa sits on the Des Moines River in the southeast quarter of Iowa, a city of about 25,000 that had been shaped by meatpacking and manufacturing and the particular working-class ethic of Midwest river towns. The kind of city where the shift whistle at the John Morrell plant set the neighborhood's schedule and the bar on the corner knew your grandfather's order. In the summer of 1977, the houses on East Main Street had screen doors and vegetable gardens and children who played in the street until their mothers called them in. And the heat that arrived in Iowa in July was the particular heavy heat of a place surrounded by corn, thick with moisture and the smell of the river and cut grass, and the specific sweetness of growing things at their peak. Roy Kerrigan worked the morning shift at the Morrell plant and was home by 3:30. Barbara Kerrigan worked part-time at the public library 3 days a week and spent the others managing the house on East Main Street with the organized competence of a woman who had 3 children aged 6 to 12 and had learned that organization was the only alternative to chaos. They were not a remarkable family in any way that would make them visible from the outside. They were simply there, on their street, in their summer, with their children in the backyard and Roy's station wagon in the driveway, and a garden that Barbara was winning the battle with, barely, every year. Maggie Kerrigan was 12 years old that July. She had recently started babysitting for 2 families on the block, the Holloways and the Sabo family, who had 3 small children and trusted Maggie in the specific way that neighborhood families trust a 12-year-old, who has demonstrated she pays attention. She was responsible in the way of oldest children who have been given real responsibilities young, seriously, without making it into a performance. She kept track of her younger siblings without being asked to, and without making them feel tracked. That was the balance she had found, the 12-year-old's particular diplomatic achievement. Danny Kerrigan was 9. He had received a bicycle for his birthday on June 27th, a red Schwinn that he had been angling for since Christmas, and whose arrival had produced a happiness that Barbara said was one of the purest things she had ever seen on a child's face. He kept it in the garage, walked it out every morning, and rode it around the block with a seriousness of purpose that made the neighbors smile. He was learning, that summer, that the bicycle gave him a radius the street had not, that the world extended past the corner in directions that were now reachable. Lily Kerrigan was 6 years old. She had lost her first tooth that morning, the lower left front tooth, which had been loose for 3 weeks, and had finally come free while she was eating toast. She had held it up at the breakfast table and said, "Look," with a gravity that made Roy laugh, and Barbara get the camera. The photograph that resulted, Lily holding the tooth up between her thumb and forefinger, her gap tooth smile, showing the precise gap the tooth had just vacated, was on the counter being developed at the Rexall that morning. Lily had put the tooth in the pocket of her shorts, which had a working zipper on it, and had zipped it shut. She was going to show her father when he got home from his shift. She had been waiting all day to show him something wonderful. Barbara left for a library board meeting at 1:30. She had asked Maggie to watch the younger two until Roy came home at 3:30. Maggie had agreed with the equanimity of a 12-year-old for whom this was a routine responsibility. At 1:45, Barbara's car pulled out of the driveway. At some point in the 2 hours that followed, 3 children went out the back door into the July afternoon and did not come back in. Roy arrived home at 3:32. The back door was open. The screen door was unlatched. The bicycle was still in the garage. Roy called Barbara at 3:45. Barbara drove home. By 4:30, they had checked every neighbor, every friend's house, every yard on the block. By 5 o'clock, Roy had called the Ottumwa Police Department. Officers arrived within 15 minutes. The search that followed was immediate and large, within the first 24 hours. Ottumwa PD was assisted by the Wapello County Sheriff's Department and the Iowa State Patrol, and volunteers from the surrounding neighborhoods had joined the organized grid search of the area from East Main Street to the river. Danny's bicycle was in the garage. His shoes were on the back porch, which meant he had been in the yard before he went wherever he went. Lily's sandals were not on the porch, which meant she had been wearing them. The initial investigation produced 2 persons of interest in the first week. The first was a transient who had been seen in the neighborhood 2 days before the disappearance, sleeping in the park near the river. He was located in Centerville by July 16th and had a verifiable alibi for the afternoon of July 9th. The second was a neighbor from 3 streets over with a prior arrest in Missouri, not related to children, a property dispute, who was interviewed and cleared through alibi confirmation within 2 weeks. The lead investigator was an Ottumwa PD detective named Bill Carver, 42 years old, who would later describe the Kerrigan case as the one that stayed in him his whole career. He interviewed everyone on East Main Street. He interviewed the families Barbara worked for at the library. He interviewed Roy's colleagues at the plant. He canvassed the neighborhood twice. In the second canvass, a neighbor named Irene Potts mentioned that a man named Dale Fetro had helped Barbara move some furniture back in April. Heavy pieces rearranged when they got a new couch, the kind of task that needed an extra set of hands. She said he was the man people called when they needed something moved. She described him as local, reliable, unremarkable. She gave Carver his name. Carver noted it. He noted it in the canvas summary as Dale Fetro, assisted with furniture move at Kerrigan residence, April 1977. No prior record, not interviewed. No connection established to incident. Not interviewed. Fetro had been in that house in April. He had been in the kitchen, in the living room, and the narrow back hallway where the stairs were, and the storage partition under them. He had crouched to lift furniture in tight spaces. He had been there for 3 hours. He had left, probably, the way workers leave, with thanks and a cup of coffee and a drive home. His jacket pocket lighter by one matchbook that had fallen into the gap under the stairs when he crouched to slide a chair toward the wall. Carver did not know about the matchbook. He did not know anyone had been under those stairs. He did not know that a matchbook was sitting 2 feet from where he was interviewing Barbara Kerrigan at her kitchen table. He did not know that the answer to his not interviewed notation was 8 inches below the floor line. The case developed for 3 years. By 1980, it had gone cold in the institutional sense, though it was never closed. Barbara and Roy drove every lead the department generated, supplemented with private searches funded by collection jars that the neighborhood bars and the library and the Morel plant passed around for the first 5 years. Every lead resolved into nothing. Every year, July 9th arrived and passed, and they were still on East Main Street, and the children were still gone. Roy Kerrigan died in April 2009. He had spent 32 years not knowing. Barbara was in their house on East Main Street until 2023, when her health made the house impossible to manage, and her daughter-in-law arranged the move to an assisted living facility in Ottawa. She was 84 years old. She had been in that house for 47 years, 3 weeks of which had been with her children, the rest without them. She left a forwarding address with the new owners. She left it in case anything came up. Something came up. Every case we cover takes weeks to research, piece together, and build from the records that families fought to keep alive. If that matters to you, take a second to like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Now, let's get back to the matchbook. Iowa Division of Criminal Investigation agent Petra Novak received the matchbook and the Scott Tim call on a Tuesday in March 2024. She was 40 years old and had been assigned to the Kerrigan cold case as part of a Wapello County backlog review 2 years earlier. She had read the file 4 times. She knew Irene Potts's statement by memory. She knew the not interviewed notation. She had, in her own review notes, written beside it, why not? Establish connection or eliminate. She had been unable to establish a connection without a physical lead. The matchbook was the physical lead. The Anchor Lounge had operated at a fixed address in Ottawa from 1961 until its closure in 1983. Its owner of record from 1971 through the closure was Dale Allen Fetro. The matchbooks, their specific design, the gold lettering on red, the striking strip pattern, were distributed exclusively at the bar's counter during the years of Fetro's ownership. A matchbook from the Anchor Lounge found in the Kerrigan house placed Dale Fetro in that house. The furniture move in April 1977 placed him there legitimately. Novak needed to establish whether he had returned. She began with what was accessible: Dale Fetro's history after 1977. He had sold the bar in 1983 and moved to Kansas City. He had a daughter, a woman named Sandra Fetro Garland, living in Des Moines. He had died in 2003 at the age of 78 in a care facility in Kansas City. She drove to Des Moines. Sandra Fetro Garland was 61 years old and met Novak at her kitchen table with the careful, watchful manner of a person who has been carrying something uncomfortable for a long time and does not yet know whether the person across from her is going to make it heavier or lighter. She said she had wondered, for years, whether she should have said something. She said she had not known what to say or to whom, or whether what she knew amounted to anything. She said she had been 15 years old in the summer of 1977, and she had seen her father come home in the late afternoon of July 9th, later than usual, and his jacket had dirt on it in a way that had made her notice. She had not asked. He had gone upstairs and come back down in different clothes. She had thought about it, on and off for 47 years, in the specific way of people who have a memory that refuses to settle into ordinary. She had her father's personal effects in a storage unit. She had never opened them. Novak obtained a search warrant for the storage unit in April 2024. Sandra provided access without being asked twice. Inside the unit, boxes of business records from the Anchor Lounge. Personal documents. A locked metal box. Sandra did not have the key. Novak had it opened. Inside the metal box, a child's sandal. A single sandal, sized for a 6-year-old, pink canvas, the kind with a Velcro strap. And a small plastic zipper bag. Inside the zipper bag, a tooth. A child's first tooth. Still in the bag after 47 years, in a metal box in a storage unit in Des Moines, kept by a man who had died in 2003 and taken the reason he kept them to a Kansas City care facility and left them there. Lily had been wearing sandals. Lily had her tooth in her pocket, in a shorts pocket with a zipper. The tooth had been in her pocket when she went out the back door on the afternoon of July 9, 1977. Novak set both objects on the table of the storage unit and looked at them for a long time. DNA analysis confirmed the biological material on the sandal, a trace skin cell sample from its interior, was consistent with the profile established from Barbara Kerrigan's DNA, taken with her consent at the assisted living facility in April 2024. The probability of a match to any other individual was described by the Iowa DCI laboratory and its report using the same formulation used in every prior such report in this series, indistinguishable from zero. The tooth was sent to the University of Iowa Forensic Odontology Unit. The confirmation that it was a human primary tooth, sized and shaped consistent with a child of approximately 5 to 7 years, was issued in June 2024. Dale Fetro had been dead for 21 years. No charges could be filed. The Wapello County Attorney's Office issued a formal finding in August 2024, naming Dale Fetro as the individual responsible for the disappearance and deaths of Margaret, Daniel, and Lily Kerrigan on July 9, 1977. The formal finding noted the not interviewed notation in Carver's 1977 Canvas summary. It noted that the matchbook had been in the house since April of that year, and that no systematic evidence collection beneath or behind structural elements had been conducted in the original search. It noted these facts without assigning blame, because the investigation of 1977 had been conducted with the resources and methodologies of 1977, and the gap between those methodologies and what would have been needed to find the matchbook was not a gap anyone had created deliberately. It was simply a gap. And it had held for 47 years. Barbara Kerrigan was brought to the Wapello County Sheriff's Office on a warm August morning by her daughter-in-law. She was 84 years old and had been waiting for 47 years, and she was going to sit down and hear what they had found. She sat across from Novak at a table in a conference room that looked like every conference room in every county building everywhere. Institutional and neutral, and Novak told her everything. She listened to all of it without speaking. When Novak finished, Barbara was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, Lily had her tooth. She was going to show Roy when he got home. She had been talking about it all morning. Novak said, "We found the tooth. It was with him. He kept it." Barbara was quiet again. Then she said a thing that Novak wrote down immediately after the meeting and included in her case notes because she did not want to misremember it. Roy died not knowing. "That's the part I can't carry anymore. I need you to know that he looked for them his whole life. I need that to be in the record." Novak told her, "It's in the record. I'm putting it in right now. Roy Kerrigan looked for his children his whole life. That is in the record." Barbara said, Good. That's all I needed. Margaret Kerrigan was 12 years old. She watched her younger siblings carefully and without making them feel watched, which is the specific diplomatic achievement of responsible oldest children, and she had been entrusted with the Saturday afternoon, and she would have brought them in safe if the afternoon had gone the way it was supposed to go. Danny Kerrigan was 9 years old, and his red Schwinn bicycle was in the garage, and the world had just expanded past the corner in both directions, and he was learning that summer what a radius felt like. Lily Kerrigan was 6 years old, and she had lost her first tooth that morning, and she had put it in her pocket and zipped it shut, and she was going to show her father when he got home, because she had been waiting all day to show him something wonderful. He came home at 3:32. The back door was open, and the children were gone, and he looked for them for 32 years, and he died in April 2009, not knowing. Barbara is 84 years old. She is in the assisted living facility. She has the photograph of Lily holding the tooth up between her fingers at the breakfast table. The gap-toothed smile showing exactly where the tooth had just been. The photograph was developed at the Rexall on the afternoon of July 9, 1977, and Barbara picked it up a week later, in the middle of everything, because someone needed to pick it up and she had been the one to remember. She has had it for 47 years. She has it still. Sandra Fetro Garland has said publicly that she wishes she had spoken sooner, and that she understands why she didn't, and that neither of those things makes the other one less true. She has said, "I was 15 and I didn't know what I knew. I know that's not enough. I don't have anything else to offer, except that I told everything when I was asked, and I'm asking the record to hold that too." The Iowa DCI has since updated its evidence collection protocols for missing children cases to include systematic physical examination of all structural cavities, underfloor spaces, and wall gaps in any residence associated with the missing person's last known location. The protocol was implemented in September 2024 and cites the Kerrigan case in its technical appendix. It notes that the Matchbook was 8 inches below the search line of the 1977 investigation, 8 inches and 47 years. A contractor named Scott Tim, who had been doing renovation work in Ottumwa for 19 years and who knew that the things people lose in old houses are usually unremarkable, did not throw away a faded red matchbook in February 2024. He put it in a bag. He called the sheriff's office. He did not know what he had found. He simply knew that not all objects that fall into gaps belong there, and that it cost nothing to let someone else decide. What does it say about the nature of institutional failure that the answer was 8 inches away from the detective who needed it, in a house he was sitting in, during an investigation he was conducting with everything he had? When Sandra Fetro Garland says she was 15 and she didn't know what she knew, what do we owe the people who carry partial knowledge for decades? And what does it ask of them when the full picture finally arrives? And when you think about Roy Kerrigan coming home at 3:32 and the back door open and the bicycle still in the garage, what does it mean to spend 32 years looking for something and die still looking? And for the record to finally say your name beside the truth you spent your life trying to reach. Justice came for the Kerrigan children after 47 years. Their story, and the story of a matchbook that fell into a gap and stayed there, reminds us that some things are simply waiting to be found, and that the people who keep looking make the finding possible. If you believe that too, subscribe so you don't miss the next case. More cases are waiting in the description. Thank you for being here.